1600 years ago, in Roman times, a whole town straddled these two fields at Water-Newton near Peterborough. Today, there's nothing whatever to be seen of it, its temples, its little church, or anything else. Here, one February day in 1975, a young lad who had a keen interest in archaeology was looking for bits of Roman pottery soon after ploughing, when he had an amazing piece of luck. His name was Alan Holmes.
We used to come on this field, my father and I, we used to come along here to get to a river to go swimming. And on the way across the field, we used to stop and pick up pieces of pottery and the odd coin. So I've really always had the interest in that history because it was there, it was for real and not just being talked about in the school classroom. It was there for you to see.
Can you tell me exactly where it was found?
Yes, it's on the very lowest point of the field, running into this corner. This is exactly where the find was made, just here.
What Alan Holmes had found was far better than pottery. It was silver, Roman silver, the earliest Christian church plate ever found. Today, in its British Museum case, the 28 pieces of Water-Newton silver glitter like the treasure they really are.
I knew that it was something substantial. I knew that it was a Roman treasure of some kind by the way it had been stacked, the way it had been hidden with the very large bowl at the bottom and everything stacked neatly inside each other. The top three vessels had been virtually cut in half by the plough. The underneath vessels had been saved from the plough because of the destruction of the ones on the top saving them. So as not to damage any gilding or anything that might be on it, I left the dirt on it for 3 weeks to dry off. And then that's when I thought that one of the bowls would be silver because I just gently rubbed my thumb on it and it came up quite shiny. I contacted the coroner for the district who, when he first saw it, said, "Ah, yes, it's Roman and it looks a bit religious, but it's made of pewter, I'm afraid to say." And when it was first taken to the British Museum, they thought it was pewter upon the first examination.
So you weren't that excited when you found it?
Oh, I was very excited, obviously. I mean, to take things of 2,000 years history and hold them in your hands and know that you're the first person in 2,000 years to hold these objects of what to them were religious and beautiful objects is a marvellous thrill on its own.
It was a tremendous find. The whole treasure must have belonged to the little Roman church at Water-Newton. The inscription on this bowl says that it was a gift from somebody called Publianus to the Lord's sanctuary. But why was it all still there? Well, it may have been buried for safety at a time of persecution. Early Roman Christians had to be careful because they were very unpopular. Here, there's not even an image of Christ, just his name hidden in this obscure symbol. The Water-Newton treasure is therefore much more than just a group of rare antiquities. It's a poignant relic of the secretive beginnings of Christian worship in these islands. But what about the beliefs of the many peoples who lived in these islands before Christianity was brought here by the Romans? Well, let's go back as far as we can to Mesolithic times. That's almost 10,000 years ago, with this rather curious and battered object in another gallery in the British Museum. It's the remains of a pair of deer antlers, you can see, rather broken, and they're still attached to part of the animal's skull. In fact, for a change, I found this myself some 30 years ago when I was a student archaeologist at Cambridge University. It was one of several found in the excavations at Star Car in Yorkshire, where the permanently damp conditions had preserved all sorts of things which normally perish, such as the platform of branches that these people had lived on. So, although it was filthy work down there at the bottom of our mud hole, it was an archaeologist's dream. You see, there are two natural holes here and here in the red deer's skull, but those Mesolithic hunters had knocked two more, rather roughly, out of the bone here and here. Obviously, they did this so that they could wear them on their heads and tie them on with some kind of thong. Now, why on earth should they do that? Well, there are two possible explanations. It might have been some kind of disguise which they wore while hunting to stalk their quarry. But it's more likely that they wore them in some kind of magic ceremony, which they believed would somehow bring them luck when next time they went out on a hunting expedition. In which case, these things are the earliest objects found in Britain with a deliberate religious purpose. Could this bizarre ceremony at Abbots Bromley in Staffordshire possibly be a memory of that remote period 10,000 years ago? Surely not. But a scientific dating method did show recently that the dancers' antlers were themselves 1,000 years old. So, with folk traditions like this, you never know. We know a great deal more about the beliefs of the early farmers who lived up here on Orkney 5,000 years ago, because this grassy mound is one of their tombs. It's called Maze How. Today you can go inside it, just as they themselves did from time to time to bury their dead. It's a voyage into a forgotten world full of surprises. The first surprise, both walls of the corridor are made of single massive slabs of stone. Suddenly, we're in a spacious chamber. Now, this is the heart of the monument, right in the middle of the mound. 3 cubbyholes, one in each wall, were originally sealed off with a huge stone plug. Obviously, whoever was buried in there must have been extremely important 50 centuries ago. But Maze How isn't a tomb, as you might think, for some great king or chieftain. It's a communal vault built to receive generations of these people's ancestors. But when the tomb was opened in recent times, there was nothing left in here at all. Each cupboard, as it were, was bare. Someone had been here before, and the queer, spindly letters scratched on the walls tell us who it was. These are runes cut by Vikings 4,000 years later in the 12th century. Hermundr with his sharp axe cut these runes, says one. Ingigarth is the most beautiful of women, says another. Away to the northwest is a great treasure hidden. Lucky will be he who can find this great fortune. But whatever the treasure was, it can't have belonged to the original incumbents of Maze How, because they lived long before the use of metals. One never finds treasure, in our sense of the word, in these Neolithic mounds. Only a few bits of pot and bone pins and things, and a mass of human bones all jumbled together. The ancestors were no longer individuals once they were dead, but together they became a scary, supernatural force, all bottled up in here, whose favor had to be sought by rituals outside. Not far from Maze How stands a circle of rough-hewn stones called the Ring of Brodgar. Very likely it was here that those ceremonies were performed. Though what they were, or who took part in them, we can never know. Nor can we explain why some circles face the rising sun, while others, like this fine one at Castlerigg in the Lake District, seem to favour the moon at night. Certainly, though, the cults they served were very widespread, for the traces of over 900 of these mysterious stone circles are scattered across our landscape. The greatest circle of all is the vast Neolithic sanctuary at Avebury in Wiltshire. Avebury was in use for 10 centuries, slowly growing into the gigantic monument that we see today. Yet, impressive though it still is, only a quarter of its stones remain. Many were pushed over and buried when a village arose inside the circle during the Middle Ages. This particular stone had been got rid of like that because when the site was excavated in the 30s, it was lying flat and completely invisible. But when it was raised up again, these were found underneath. A rusty old pair of scissors and 3 little medieval coins. It turned out that they were the possessions of somebody, a barber probably, who'd actually been helping to bury the stone. He must have been scrabbling about in the pit, finishing it off or something. A rope snapped. The stone leant over and fell, all 13 tons of it. The archaeologists found his skeleton still there, trapped beneath it. His superstitious friends had dared not touch the victim of the ancient stone. Even today, a feeling of uncanny power still lingers in this sacred pagan place, around which cluster so many ancestral tombs. But Silbury Hill, nearby, doesn't seem to have been a tomb at all. It's just the largest man-made mound in Europe, once somehow connected with the forgotten rites performed within Avebury itself. This, though, is a line of burial mounds some way off on Salisbury Plain. But these no longer contain vaults full of jumbled-up ancestors. Each is the tomb of a single eminent individual belonging to a new Bronze Age race with completely different beliefs. In one was found the skeleton of a powerfully built man surrounded by the symbols of his earthly rule, including, for the first time, gold. Here, then, was someone who kept his identity after death and who took with him riches befitting a chieftain who would be chieftain also in the next world. At the center of several groups of these Bronze Age barrows stands Stonehenge. Here, the newcomers converted a much older sanctuary into the most spectacular stone circle of all. It was they who erected the enormous sarsen stones and crowned them with massive lintels. These were all brought from the Marlborough Downs close by. Close by, that is, on the map. But that still meant dragging these monsters over rough ground for a distance of several miles. But it's these rather more modest bluestones, as they're called, which are the oddest components of Stonehenge. Because the only place where they could have been quarried is in the tip of South Wales, over 130 miles away. Just before 2000 BC, they set them up as a horseshoe in the middle here, and then changed their minds almost straight away and set them up as two circles, one inside the other. Then they put up the big sarsens, but they removed the bluestones altogether, put them somewhere quite else, outside the monument, and left them there for 500 years. And they brought them back again, set them up as an oval in the middle this time, changed their mind again straight away, and put them where they now are. Now, why all this shifting around? Goodness knows. All one can say is that that's what they actually did, and that, to me, is one of the biggest mysteries that this extraordinary place has to offer. Today, over 500,000 visitors come here every year to marvel at Britain's most famous prehistoric monument. But they have all sorts of notions about what it was for.
Well, I don't know. I've read that it's got something to do with sun worship and such as that.
I don't know. I think it's probably a burial ground.
But what do you think it is?
Well, I don't know, some kind of navigational aid for the space shipping, something like that.
They aren't sure. I don't think anybody does, but they think it's a calendar or it has something to do with the time of the year, or midsummer or something.
I don't know much about it, but I've heard about it a little.
What do you think it is?
A sort of calendar from the Druids about 2,000 years before Christ.
What do you think it is?
A pile of rocks.
These days, that pile of rocks at midsummer sunrise has become a place of pilgrimage for all sorts of eccentric people, including the latter-day Druids, whose connection with the monument is hardly possible. The fact is that Stonehenge had been abandoned for some 1,000 years before any real Druids arrived in Britain. The Druids were the priesthood of the Celtic peoples, who had little use for man-made monuments like Stonehenge, but they again held totally different beliefs. This is much more like a Druid sanctuary, a clearing in a dark and spooky wood. See, the Celts felt that powerful spirits lurked in natural places like this, in the sources of streams where water bubbles mysteriously up out of the earth. Another place they felt that the divinity resided was in oddly shaped trees. Sometimes we get a rare glimpse of these demonic Celtic gods in crude, frightening heads of stone, some expressing dangerous ill humor or hideous, grimacing mirth. By far the commonest relics of Celtic religion, though, are their votive offerings. Their belief was that they could gain the help of the spirit of this stream, for example, by giving it some object of value, like a weapon, perhaps, or, in some cases, even a magnificent gold neck ring like this. So, with great reverence, they would cast it into the water. Of course, nobody would dare to touch the spirit's sacred property after that. so Celtic votives could still be lying there today. Perhaps that's why a number of Iron Age objects have been turning up in this gravel pit near Peterborough in the last couple of years. 2,000 years ago, this dark earth above the gravel was the muddy bottom of the River Nene, which has since changed its course. Several Celtic iron swords have been found in that ancient river bed. They're scattered over a wide area, suggesting that they'd been cast into the water at different times. Some have been found by excavator driver David Hand. I gather you found quite a few of these,
Yeah,
Mr.
I
Hand.
found 3, and they're all bent like this, and probably this is the best condition of all of them.
What sort of place did you find them?
Well, there's sort of different places on the site. One was in the dump truck, one was in the mechanical digger's bucket, and one was sticking out the earth about a foot above the gravel.
When they turned up, did you know what they were?
Well, I'd seen similar objects in museums and such like, so we had a good idea what they was.
Is it a sort of moment of excitement when you find one of these?
Probably the first one was, but they came out pretty quick after that, and we just sort of expected to find them every day, but we didn't.
It's quite likely that all these were votive offerings, gifts to one of those mysterious Celtic spirits that inhabited the river. There's nothing mysterious about this little bronze figure of Roman Hercules. The practical Romans brought with them to Britain much more down-to-earth gods in lifelike human form. They helped people with their professions and their special needs from day to day. So, the beefy personality of Mars, the god of war, appealed especially to soldiers. Businessmen preferred Mercury, the nimble, quick-witted god who brought commercial success. While Roman love life was ruled by Venus. And since that always seemed a bit chancy, she also controlled the luck of gamblers. The highest throw in dice was called Venus. Vulcan, with his hammer, was the god of craftsmen. This thin plaque made of silver foil was the Roman type of votive offering, which people bought to pin up in the god's temple, in thanks for some especial favor. Early Roman Christians gave thanks to Christ in exactly the same way. So these curious silver triangles from the Walter Newton treasure, marked with the secret Christian symbol, were votive plaques too. Not until after Christianity became the official religion of the late Roman Empire did the cross become its universal sign. These primitive graveyard crosses, however, are Irish. As soon as England was overrun by pagan Anglo-Saxons, it was only in Ireland that Christianity was able to survive. At Glendalough, spread along a pretty fold in the Wicklow Hills, are the remains of a very early monkish settlement. Sometime in the 6th century, St. Kevin, who was an Irish holy man, came here and chose a spot over there, across the lake, to live in as a hermit. It was beautiful, just as it still is today. But it was far from the companionship of other men and very uncomfortable. So, perched on the slope, he lived in solitude, devoted only to the single-minded concentration on the works of God. And in due course, the fame of St. Kevin's austerities drew other hermits to this remote place, and the settlement grew into a populous monastery, with buildings scattered all the way down the valley. Nevertheless, this sanctified tranquility was soon to be shattered by a new menace, which is signified by the tall round tower which dominates Glendalough. In monasteries throughout Ireland, such towers were built as lookouts to warn against the approach of Viking raiders in search of plunder. In spite of the saintly poverty of the monks themselves, even remote religious communities like this sometimes possessed wonderful treasures in gold and silver, such as the chalice found at Ardagh in County Limerick, now in the museum in Dublin. It was found 120 years ago by a boy digging potatoes, and ever since this splendid vessel has been regarded as the masterpiece of early Irish metalwork. But very recently, only in 1980, something else came to light to rival the famous Ardagh chalice. On a low hill at Derrynaflan in County Tipperary, there stands the stunted ruin of the church of one of those early Irish monasteries. Here, one rainy afternoon, Michael Webb and his son Mike brought their metal detectors. It's questionable whether they should have been searching around such an obvious ancient monument as this. Nevertheless, they turned up a most spectacular treasure which might never have been found at all.
When we saw the artifacts down there to start with, I was the first to put my hand in and take out something. I didn't know what it was. In fact, it was the pattern. I lifted it out, didn't know what it was. I saw the intricate designs on the outside, and I said, God, look at this. And saw Daddy there with a big chalice in his hand, you know. he was just pale white, and so was I at the time.
Well, I suddenly realized what it was, you see, and I got a bit of a shock. Well, we're told that it is a very, very important find.
And in good condition.
And in good condition. Oh, lovely colour. You know, the bluey-green colour on the chalice, and the different coloured golds.
And the gold was bright.
The gold was as bright as the day it went down.
Oh, what, you went to Dublin with the things straight away? Did you?
Oh, yes, they got it they got it by 3 o'clock the Monday afternoon.
And were they delighted to see them?
In a very professional way.
How do you
They
mean?
didn't appear to be as excited as I was. They sat me down and gave me a drink, which I thought was very decent of them. And I kept wanting to jump up and say, look, come and have a look at this, and come and have a look at that. And they were saying, oh, well, yes, that's all right. Yes, we've got one of those. Didn't strike me as funny at the time, I must say. And then he started, Dr. Brendan O'Riordan called in his staff, and they all examined the goods. And next minute, I was outside the museum, outside in the street, sort of wondering what was it all about. You know? I sort of felt lost without it. I mean, I was being so excited I hadn't slept for 2 nights.
Very likely it had been a murderous Viking raid that caused this valuable object to be hidden in the ground and then be forgotten for 1,300 years. But today, all cleaned up and restored, the Derrynaflan chalice takes its rightful place as one of the great treasures of the Irish nation. Across the water, in the meanwhile, Christianity had returned to England. This marvellous little jewelled cross is a rare personal relic of that time, for it belonged to St. Cuthbert, a 7th century Anglo-Saxon saint. That cross was found beneath the simple slab which covers his last resting place. And over this hallowed spot arose the whole towering bulk of Durham Cathedral to celebrate the presence of the saint's body within. In here, one of the greatest architectural masterpieces in all of Europe, everyone, not just a few monks, could take part in truly public worship. With the building of the great cathedrals in the Middle Ages, Christianity took on the form it has had ever since.
David to them, saying, drink ye all of this, for this is my blood of the New Testament, which is shed for you and for many for the remission of sins.
On special occasions, the altar at Durham is laden with this set of glittering plate. It was all presented to the cathedral 300 years ago, and it's still in regular use. All the other treasures we've seen in this program are the relics of past beliefs, precious antique works of art, locked away in museum cases, never to be used again. Yet once, they too had this extra value as objects with a holy purpose, to be handled with great reverence in religious ceremony, just like this chalice today in Durham Cathedral.